And we'll be looking at the issue of non-remittance of funds into the Federation account, which has been a major concern for most people. And so I'm being joined on the program by the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Kari Assets Management Limited, Johnson Chukwu, and Gabriel Idahosa, who's also the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of UHY Maji and Co. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, Happy New Year.
Thank you so much. Yes, that's the first time I'm seeing you this year. Now, gentlemen, we're looking at non-remittance of funds by government agencies into the Federation account and how best to manage it going forward. Of course, we can't talk about solving this problem without looking at some of the issues. Looking at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it requires that government agencies pay about 80% of their operating surplus into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Now the question is, how do you define an operating surplus?
Well, a surplus is a surplus. Perhaps that's the easiest way to say it. What you earn, what you receive during the year as revenue, less what you spend. You pay your salaries, you run your operating expenses. At the end of the year, if you have any amount left, you keep 20% and you give 80% of the federal account. It's that simple. But inside what you spend is what are you allowed to spend, and what are you not allowed to spend. That's the question really, because some expenses are authorized within the mandate of the government agency. Some expenses are not authorized. So it has to be expenses that are approved in a budget, usually by the National Assembly or by the governing council or board of that parastatal.
But then, you see, sometimes some companies go through the whole year without having a surplus like that. So how do they begin to balance their books and make sure that what belongs to Caesar, which in this case is the government, gets paid to government, and the government isn't shortchanged?
Well, if you have surplus, then you have 80% of surplus. If you have deficits, you have 80% of deficit. So you can't give the deficit to the Federation account. So really, you are talking of giving anything if you do, in fact, have surplus.
Okay, Johnson, you want to say something about this?
Well, let me just add a little to what he has said. In the first place, when you talk of operating surplus, you are talking of excess of revenue from your core line of business, from your core operation, from core business. In that case, it does not include donor agency contribution. For instance, if the nature of your business, the nature of the agency's business involves generating revenue, like the customer excise, then the operating revenue is based on the core of their business. Then operating expense is the day-to-day administrative cost of running that agency or ministry, as the case may be. But in the case of surplus we are referring to, it would not include capital expenditure. That's why they have to go to the budget to get approval to incur capital expenditure in any fiscal year. But going to your second question, you said, look, what of agencies that do not have surplus? Not all agencies of government generate revenue. There are several agencies of government that are actually cost-oriented agencies that actually only incur costs and they do not have revenue stream. So for ministries, agencies, and departments, they rely solely on government allocation. So they in their instances, they do not have to talk about, they don't talk about issue of excess or surplus, because they are basically cost units. But those agencies that are revenue generating unit agencies are the ones who remit 80% of the excess of their revenue over their operating expenses. In this case, like I said, operating expenses means those expenses they incur in the day-to-day operation of their business, in the cost of generating those revenues.
Now, we know that the FRC insists that operating surplus is based on accrual accounting. Now, this accrual accounting, is it the accounting profit or excess of income over expenditure that is prepared under the accrual accounting, or the excess of inflow over outflow under the cash accounting system?
Well, accrual means, for example, if take any agency that is supposed to collect revenue, say take the airport, for example. If the airlines are supposed to pay money to NCAA, they accrue that income. You are owing me 10 billion as of December. I've recognized it as money I'm expecting. So it's accrued. And government recognizes that as an accrued amount. So the expectation is that you will collect that money, take away your expenses and remit it. So at any point in time, there will be accrued revenue that has not been collected. And that is where the issue of remittance now comes in.
Yes.
Some remittances don't get done in time because you have accrued for that revenue. You are expecting X amount from all the people that use your service at the airport or NEPA at that time, or PACN.
But then you see, some companies are saying that, some of these agencies are actually saying that there's no clear definition for them of what an operating surplus should be, because if the FRC says it, going by its own understanding of what the surplus is based on the accrual accounting, then it should take about 95% or thereabout. Maybe I'm not getting the figures right, but it should take a certain amount of money from these agencies. And then we also have the Federal Ministry of Finance also saying about 25% should be remitted to the Federation account.
Look, the thing is that the act was premised on the fact that you collect this amount and you are able to remit it on time. In other words, the parastatals were not supposed to actually grant credit facilities. When you go and clear your goods, you're supposed to pay before you clear your goods. So where the accrual and the cash collection is equal, you don't have any issue. But where an agency provides credit facility, like typically some of the agencies in the airport, where you can land your plane and take off without paying, you pay later, then you will continue to have these issues of accruals where the agency is supposed to pay the money because it's revenue, but it has not collected it.
You mentioned the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Now, we know that the House Committee on Finance is trying to do something, as the National Assembly basically is trying to look into this law and ensure that everybody gets a win-win situation and the federal government is not shortchanged, as it were. Now, some of these agencies have actually complained that most of the laws are actually ambiguous in nature, and so with the possibility of having this law looked into, is there going to be an opportunity for stakeholders, for instance, to give their own pinch of salt to ensure that this law favors everybody?
Well, the purpose of any law amendment is to make sure that we have a more robust law. And I believe that in all instances where the National Assembly has gone to amend any law, they always have a window to bring in stakeholders to express their opinion and make inputs into that law process. I want to believe that's what the National Assembly is going to do in this instance. But going back to some of the questions you asked earlier, where you're talking of accrual concept, there are actually two bases of accounting you have. You have the accrual concept and the cash basis concept.
Yeah, which Gabriel, what did you say?
Okay.
No, listen to you.
Okay, so if you look at under the cash basis, which what the government uses in most instances for its accounting purposes, what they basically do is to report cash receipts and cash payments. That actual receipt and actual payment. But in the case of accrual basis, for the revenue generating MDAs, they sometimes do not receive the revenue they are entitled to. For like when he did mention the issue of, for instance, FAN, Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, where some of the landing rights that are supposed to be paid for are not paid within the fiscal year. And the government fiscal year is actually January to December. So where there are outstanding receivables, those receivables will be factored in determining the amount that the agency is supposed to remit. And also where there are outstanding payables, there are some obligation that an agency may incur that they have not paid before the end of the fiscal year. So those payables are also factored in determining what is the surplus that has been accrued or has been earned by that agency before it makes any remittance. So for instance, if the agency has received cash returns of maybe 1 billion, but the outstanding payments or receipts of 200 million, it simply means that the total revenue of that agency for that fiscal year is 1.2 billion. And if he has incurred total cost of, for instance, 600 million, okay, for which of that total cost, maybe 500 million has been paid in cash, and there's a standing payment that he has to make to other related agencies or other beneficiaries, and 100 million. It actually has incurred 600 million, not 500 million. If it was a cash basis of accounting, it would have been 500 million. So what he has as surplus will be 600 million, and that's on which basis it is supposed to limit the 80%. Then the other questions you ask, as when you talk of you ask the second question related to how do you determine what is a surplus. So that's basically how to determine the surplus under the accrual concept. But another cash concept is basically tied to the amount of cash receipts and cash payments that an agency receives within that period, which, like I said earlier, is the basis that most government agencies use for their accounting purposes. Okay. But the private sector uses the accrual concept. And that's what the government wants those agencies that are generating revenue to adopt.
Now, how many revenue generating agencies do we have? Because according to the Act, there's currently 31 agencies covered by the Act, and it's supposed to be reviewed upward to include all ministries, departments, and agencies operating in the country. Now, some say we have 56, and others say 60. Now, could this be a problem in terms of covering all revenue generating agencies in the country and ensuring that these remit what is due to the Federation account accordingly?
Well, I'll take it from what the government has done. Okay, when we talk of what is the actual number of agents that are revenue generation, and we're saying that figure is not certain because some agencies' revenues are not regular, so you may not classify them as revenue generating agencies, but somehow they have one-off revenue. But the key thing is that the government has actually gone ahead to say, look, we want to implement the single treasury account. Under the single treasury account, all the agencies of government will have a consolidated accounting system, a consolidated cash management system that will trap all government revenues and all payments through a centralized, unified cash management system located with central bank. You're going to have its treasury main account, a single treasury account, main account, which will be central bank. Then you may have sub account that may reside with other banks. But the key thing is that at the end of every business day, all balances in all government related accounts are swept to the main account, to the main treasury single account. And you have a consolidated system, and which is based on the fungibility of all government revenues, which means that all agencies of government can actually receive disbursement of their capital or of their budgetary allocation from that central account. That way, whatever agency or whatever number of agencies that are generating revenue or revenue generating agencies we won't have to contend with that. All revenues generated by government, all expenses made by government are to be consolidated under a central cash management unit called the single treasury account. And that's the solution to all these issues.
Okay, but do you have any different view from what he's said?
No, that's the fact. What has happened is government has said there are so many agencies, we can't even track all these things if you want to depend on reports they send. So let's have one big computer that everybody's hooked up to. Wherever you are in the world, you are hooked up to the same computer. As you collect money daily and you put it in your own system, it shows in the central system, which he has described, and then we know what money is coming in. As you are spending as well, you should go in there. But that is just an IT matter. It's a system matter that shows the picture. But the legal issue of who is to pay 80% or not is decided by the Act.
And that
is the Act that says if they are 31 or 56, it is a matter of law. So your money may be there, the system may show that you have money there, but the Treasury cannot take out 80% just because the money is there. It has to be, the Act has to allow you to do it. So the single Treasury system is to capture information, to ensure that everybody's information is in one place.
Okay.
And then you don't give me wrong information.